After a week off, we are back on Madden Benz Unfiltered. Tim Benz and Mark Madden with you, brought to you by the Barber School of Pittsburgh. Locations on Banksville Road and in Monroeville. Day and night classes available, enrolling now at bsp.edu. Barber School, yes, Google Barber School of Pittsburgh, bsp.edu. And brought to you by Ultra Genius Brewing Company. Try their brilliantly crafted brews and enjoy their full kitchen at their brewery in Ambridge, or try their new Trailside Tap Room on the Montour Trail in Imperial. Treat yourself at Ultra Genius Brewing Company and tell them that I sent you for a free small pour on the house. Mark, lots to get to, lots to get caught up on, and lots to preview as it relates to Steelers training camp. We'll start things off with the Pirates. Good weekend overall. They take 2 of 3 for the best team in baseball in the Philadelphia Phillies at a 6-game win streak before it was halted yesterday. Now it really gets important for them if they really are a contender for the wild card. They got St. Louis. They got Arizona twice. They got the Padres all coming up within the next 15 games. Ben Sherrington's talking about how that streak of 8 of 9 games that they won altered the math. I disagree with that. I think the math always said that they're in it. I think that the very nature of what the baseball playoff standings are now have kept them in it. And the more they win, the longer he runs out of excuses to go get help.
Well, I think that the math has long since been adjusted. I laugh at that. I also laugh when I hear people say, well, now they're going to show their intents. Like, I think Joe Starkey or somebody like that wrote a column about how they should get Brent Rooker to announce their intent. Tim, we've known their intent since the day that hillbilly grifter bought the team. Okay, they've told us what they are. We should have believed them a long time ago. They'll go get a token bat at the deadline like that jabroni from the LA Angels. Ain't going to get nobody no good. And the teams they're competing with are all franchises that play to win. So they're very likely to go get significantly more help than the Pirates.
I'm hoping whatever they do, it kind of turns out to be a J Happ kind of thing where, maybe they just try to sell who they got, and it just so happens that guy runs into a hot streak. That's what happened with Happ. I mean, we kind of forget that he wasn't a really big name at the deadline. There were lots of other pitchers that the Pirates were rumored to be going after that they just didn't get. Happ was not viewed all that great until he became great and was awesome down the stretch for him. I hope they stumble into something good like that to help them if they are to get into the playoffs.
It just feels different with pitchers than it does with hitters, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like a pitcher, it seems like a legitimately fresh start. And I don't know why I'm saying that. With the hitter, it's just more the same. Although if you're crossing leagues like the LA, well, then again, with the interleague play and all that, I just don't have my hopes up. In any way you can have your hopes up. Not for them making it, not for them acquiring somebody good at the deadline. I think they're going to just miss. And I think that's fine by them. I think it keeps the hook baited.
That goes back to what you said about announcing their intentions. I kind of think they've announced their intentions already. I think they've been doing that all year because I think until this run where they've scored.
Dating back years, not just this year, dating back years.
But even for this
they're very content to just the most significant thing that happened this weekend, as far as their ownership's concerned, was 3 sellouts. Doesn't matter that a lot of the fans were from Philly, and I didn't go to any of the games, so I don't know the percentage. I can't even estimate. But that's all they care about is revenue. Revenue, revenue, revenue.
All right, so Pirates fans want to hear from you about the recent hot streak for the Pirates. Does that alter their thinking? If it does alter their thinking, what do they do with it? What does it do for you as a fan when it comes to your thinking about where they are? And if you look at the teams, Mark, some of them have gotten a little bit hotter too. All that said, there's like 5 teams now within a game and a half of the top 2 wild card spots, and the Pirates do play a bunch of them. It's great that they played as well as they did against the Phillies. They beat up on a team they should have beaten up on the White Sox before the break. But now the Cardinals are the team that they really have to beat, and so much so is the case for the Padres and the Diamondbacks coming up next too.
Yeah, it's I don't know whether Shelty made a great move or got away with one. A bad move.
By sitting on Keller and Skenes.
Keller and Skenes till the St. Louis series. I also still wonder if Keller wasn't hurt, isn't nursing something where he was off for a week. after having pitched just 3 innings in the start before the All-Star game. I guess we'll find out tonight he's supposed to start, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But that's not what I would have done. I would have pitched Keller and maybe even Skenes in the Philly series, but now they won 2 out of 3. And yeah, suddenly the Cardinals series, I mean, having those pitchers available makes it even more crucial, right? They got to win 2 out of 3 against the Cardinals at least.
Now they've got Keller, Skenes, and Perez lined up for the St. Louis series as of now. Speaking of Skenes, Mark, we talked about this. I think it's kind of a fun topic that we brought up on the podcast, and I wanted to bring it up here as well. People can comment too. You said you thought that the only guy really in Pittsburgh sports that came on and lived up to his hype as much and with as much splash as Skenes has so far is clearly Mario. Maybe Sid. You also brought up Tony Dorsett as a freshman.
Tony Dorsett for sure.
Tony Dorsett for sure.
It's different because it's college and it's so long ago we've almost forgotten about it. But yeah, Tony, I would rank in order in terms of announcing their presence with immediacy. I would go Mario first, Skenes narrowly so over Dorsett, then Sid.
The thing about Dorsett that I didn't realize, but I wrote it up for our Madden Monday podcast post after you said it, I'd forgotten. I probably heard this once and forgotten. He was the first freshman to become an All-American in 29 years. The previous guy to have done that was Doc Blanchard in 1944.
Well, now, Tim, don't forget, there was a long period there where freshmen couldn't play.
Right, but was that just because of the war that Blanchard did it?
I don't know, but there was a long period when freshmen couldn't play.
Yeah, it used to be, and then it was him, but he was great regardless. And I think it was 50.
I always laugh that Wilt Chamberlain wasn't permitted to play for Kansas as a freshman.
Right, as opposed to what the rules are now. Hey, real quick, we'll get back to the Skenes thing, but since we brought up basketball, there isn't a North Sudan out there somewhere that's going to beat Team USA after South Sudan almost beat them by a point, is there?
You know what that reminded me of? The scene in White Men Can't Jump where he's trying to get his girlfriend on the set for the game show for Jeopardy. No, Billy. You're not shooting from Ghana. You, my friend, are shooting from the Sudan.
I mean, like, everybody was praising LeBron for the big plays that he made and what he did down the stretch to help them to win, but
it was against the Sudan.
Well, exactly.
They're not, you know what? They're not going to win the gold medal, and I'm kind of rooting against them. Because I don't see the Olympics as this great show of national fervor. Herb Brooks said it best. We won a hockey tournament. Okay, if Herb's not waving the flag, then, none of us should be. They have too many egos, too many big names that are old. They left legs off that team. They're not going to win.
One thing that stuck out to me about it, well, actually, I was on Twitter because I was just kind of tracking it while I was out of the country, but Super 70 Sports, which I love on Twitter, they put up Charles Barkley's quote about, I don't know who Angola is, but Angola's got trouble coming. And then underneath they just said, meanwhile, currently, American basketball fans hoping for big comeback against Sudan. Like, that's the attitude difference. And that's the approach that dream team had versus whatever exists with this group that they've thrown together.
I think LeBron should go down in history as one of the most overrated athletes ever, despite being really good, if that makes sense.
What'd you think of that list that ESPN put together, that list of athletes since 2000? I thought if you can't put Brady, LeBron, and I'm trying to think who else should be thrown into that. Tiger Woods is the 3 best athletes since 2000. You don't have any of them.
Well, now Tiger, a lot of his prime was before the turn of the century, though.
Well, 13 of his 15 majors were after 2000.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, the first,
really?
He broke onto the scene in 97, but I think 13 of his 15 majors were after 2000. They had
that list was put together, for inclusivity and political correctness. Like, there were literally athletes on there I never heard of.
The cricket guy.
Well, and all the women's track stars practically.
The race car drivers and all. Like, if it becomes frivolous if you go that far with it.
And race car, that's not a sport. They drive in a circle, for heck's sake. And Michael Phelps, number 1, does anybody still remember him? I mean, nobody cares about swimming except in Olympic years, and even then it's only very temporary. I think that lists like that, really anything, well, lists like that are lame and lazy in the first place. But it's like I said about the two women's hockey players going in the Hockey Hall of Fame this year. We've forgotten that one of the words in Hall of Fame is fame. Not only do you have to do something, people have to know you did it.
Yeah, and I just kind of laughed at some of the people that were in front of, like, well, look at the hockey players. I'm not going to gin up too much anger over Sid being 22nd if they're going to be that far-reaching with who they include in the list. But Sid was one of only 3 hockey players on the list. Like, Mark, God bless the two of them. The sun hasn't come up on a day where Adrian Beltre and Max Scherzer are better baseball players than Alexander Ovechkin or Connor McDavid are hockey players. And they just completely ignored hockey.
Not only that, but Cristiano Ronaldo got ranked 14th. He's one of the 5 best soccer players ever. So how's he 14th on that list?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. When you open it up to that many, then you have to go to the second layer of whatever that sport is.
And also, people care about that. And I think that needs to figure into something like this. People will be talking about Ronaldo in 20 years. They've almost forgotten about Michael Phelps already.
Then they turned around and went to the next list for like what they were doing 25 years if they were to do this list again, and Skenes was on it. Skenes was one of only 2 baseball players on it. The other one was Soto. Is his career going to be that good? We talked about already how good
they predicted a list for how many years from now?
I think it was 2050, if they did the list again in 2050. So, again, it was frivolous, but they put Skenes on it, saying that his career would be that good. And it might be.
All of sports media, 90% rather, of sports media is frivolous. You look at The Athletic, for every thoughtful piece that site runs, that app, they have 9 lists, 9 rankings, 9 Mount Rushmores. Everything's an effing list. Steelers, top battles at training camp, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just, I don't know. It's not how I envision my profession going.
If Skenes is on that list, it's not going to be like even what Barry Bonds was in Pittsburgh for that long, I think, before he goes elsewhere.
Well, it's tough to predict with pitchers, though, because the Tommy John thing, could just, bloop career, certainly hindered, halted, whatever.
It is, but I think you pointed it out in the podcast that what are we looking at here? 5 years like Cole, maybe even less?
I think the next, 4 years, including this one for sure. But I think once he gets his second big arbitration award, they will trade him at midseason.
I did. I made a point of it, Mark, that, I was on a boat for most of the last week, but I made sure when I was ashore on Tuesday to go find the All-Star game, I was able to find it. And it was just fun to have a Pirate be the center of baseball conversation. I thought he owned the night. I thought he was great. I love the reaction from Aaron Judge after he went for the first pitch, grounded out. He had a strategy. He had an approach. He was going to try to launch one the first thing he saw. Frankly, Ohtani did the same thing. He just swung and missed. Judge was pissed. He wanted that at bat bad. And I think Skenes being who he is generated that excitement.
It was great theater, and it was totally worthy of the hype. The first 2 batters, Kwan and Gunnar Henderson, were totally confounded by what Skenes was throwing, and you could tell. Henderson even said he was glad to get a tap back to the pitcher. And I also like the matchup of Mason Miller against Shohei Ohtani. Mason Miller, of course, the reliever from Oakland, out of Bethel Park. And wow, can he throw? Wow. He might move at the deadline, Can you imagine if a team gets him at the deadline? Holy heck.
Yeah, any team with bullpen problems that can maybe move their struggling closer to a setup guy or just have Miller be the setup guy for that closer, that could be an ultimate thing.
Could you imagine, and I'm perfectly happy with David Bednar. I think he's a good closer. Could you imagine Miller coming into the 9th after Skenes has pitched the first 7, but you put, say, Holderman with that sweeper in there in the 8th as a sorbet to cleanse the palate, and then it's back up to $1.03 for the 9th. That would really take teams off their game.
All right, so Pirates fans want to hear from you. And by the way, just a reminder, 6th-seeded Diamondbacks with 84 wins. They got in, and I think it was 87 the year before that for the Phillies. So if we want to talk about Ben Cherington math, they're at 99 games. They win 35 of their remaining games. That's playing 555 ball. All you got to do is look at the teams who currently have playoff spots. The three teams that are tied for that last wild card spot, they're at 510. The Pirates are at 505. They don't have to be that much better. They just need to be a little bit better to get to those numbers and make sure.
But what they need to do, too, is what they just did. They need to have at least one more 6 or 7 game winning streak.
Without the corresponding losing streak to wipe it out. And I think
they need to get out in front of it. I don't see them making up ground at the end. Because by then, and I'm not kidding, Skenes and Jones might get shut down, at least skipping starts.
Yeah, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they feel less concerned about that in September because Jones has missed so many already.
I don't think so. Well, with Skenes, I don't think so. I think you'll see Skenes skip starts and maybe even be shut down, depending on the standings. Maybe they'll gamble and try to save him for the playoffs. I think it's ridiculous, given that opportunity rarely knocks here in Pittsburgh, given that you'd be saving his arm for the Yankees someday. But I think that's how it'll play out. I would love to give Skenes a shot of truth serum and say, hey, should we try to win or should we try to protect your arm and your money? Because I think he'd answer the latter if he had to tell the truth.
Well, Mark, you brought it up before. Let's get to our list of big battles at training camp for the Steelers, because that's coming up on Wednesday. I think one that's not been talked about enough is outside linebacker, quite honestly. And maybe that bleeds into what they aren't doing beyond outside linebacker for a pass rush. For as much as we love sacks around here, they were 11th in sacks last year, and 19 of 46 came from T.J. Watt. They got to spread the pass rush distribution around. I think that's something that hasn't been talked about enough. And I think a big reason for why they sunk the way they did, obviously, the lack of production and availability from Cam Hayward. And I'm just not ready to assume he's going to give him 10 or 11 sacks coming back this year.
The defense is horribly overrated. Horribly overrated. And they need better from Highsmith. They need a more varied pass rush, like you and I talked about on the podcast. They need to get the inside linebackers and the D-backs. I loved when they had that so-called blitz corner when Mike Hilton was at nickel. I don't know if anybody can do that now, the Beanie Baby or whoever. But yeah, they need a better and more pass rush.
I don't want to phrase the way you phrased it, Mark. Maybe you can do it more specifically, but you kind of referenced before when we were talking yesterday that you think some of the optimism, maybe even that you tried to talk yourself into, is fading as we're getting closer to Latrobe here.
Yeah, because they stink at receiver and they stink at cornerback beyond Porter. And those are two of the three most important positions in football. It's a passing league. It's a game where you try to outscore the other team, and they don't have the capability to do that or to catch up. And quarterback's the most important position, and we try to be optimistic about Russ, but he's 35, and the last couple of years have been up and down.
Yeah, and the other thing is, along the offensive line, they might have more talent there. I'm just not sure if they're going to play it.
Matt Williamson, the football guru, thinks that when Thursday comes, is Thursday the first day on the field?
First day on the field is Thursday. Yeah, they report on Wednesday.
He thinks that Fatano will be at right tackle and Jones at left tackle from the get-go. I just don't see that. I just don't think they've foreshadowed that at all in OTAs and minicamp. And isn't that the purpose of OTAs and minicamp?
Yeah, and I heard what you said about maybe them keeping Dan Moore. I mean, they would never say this out loud. I think that they like Moore as much as they do because they feel like they've gotten a bargain out of him. They love a bargain. They love a guy who overproduces, and getting that many starts out of Moore, he's already overproduced in their eyes. I just don't
Everybody says Dan Moore stinks. Every metric says Dan Moore stinks, but the Steelers are right. They're always right.
Until it comes to making the playoffs or winning a playoff game, then they haven't been right in almost a decade.
It's a badly coached, badly managed team. It just is. I'm sorry, but maybe someday people will come around to judge them by their results, like every other team in big-time sports.
Oh, Mark, I skipped one thing I wanted to get to. We didn't get to this in the podcast either, and it's worth mentioning, I think, anyway. He was a guest on your show. He's a guest on my podcast. Jim Leyland gave his Cooperstown speech, his Hall of Fame speech. I actually thought he really hit the notes right when he talked about his time managing in Pittsburgh, his connection with the fans, but even more so talking about those teams in the 1990s where, they had lots of thrills together, but he said, we know we broke your hearts. And that's kind of the story of those teams in the early 90s. They were great and fun to watch, and they're as good as it's gotten for a long, long time. But it did end hollow, unfortunately.
Well, I was glad to see Jim make the Hall of Fame. I didn't hear his speech. One thing that's underestimated about Jim, and Jim had this gruff exterior with the Marlboros. Ask anybody who played for him, and he was a lot of fun to play for. He had a laugh. He let you have a laugh. Casey told me when he joined the Tigers.
No, this is a great story. Yeah.
You know what his steal sign was? Leyland said, if I jump in the air and never come down, then you can steal.
I still think it's one of the great lines of all time.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
What do you say about Donnelly?
When Don Kelly made the team, he said, Kel, I don't know what I'm thinking, but you made the team. Try not to embarrass me.
Now go get him. Now go pinch him tonight against like Mariano Rivera or somebody like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Jim. The only thing he did here I didn't like was when he gave that speech on the field about how he would see the rebuilding through and then left to Miami like a week later.
Yeah, right. And that was.
And again, I look at what he ultimately left, and I don't blame him.
Yeah, and that clip's been going around about the response to him at the '94 All-Star game. I can't believe that's been 30 years already. I admit it, Mark. I went to see that All-Star game as a fan. I wasn't working professionally in the media yet. I was still in college. I think that would have been like the last time I remember going to something and being just completely overwhelmed by what I was seeing. That much talent that they had on the field that day. That was one of the great All-Star games of all time. And I kind of walked out of the stadium after Gwynn scored the winning run. I'm like, what did I just watch? I got to go back in my head and remember what I just watched.
It's sad how the MLB All-Star game just died a slow death because they stopped leaving the starters in for very long. The starting pitcher used to pitch 2 or 3 innings, Tim. It just stopped being competitive, and a lot of that was interleague play. You used to see matchups like Steve Blass was on my show this week, and he talked about Rod Carew getting an RBI single off him in the 72 All-Star game. That was the only time Steve Blass ever faced Rod Carew. It was, you got totally unique matchups all the time. And now you just don't. That takes away from the game. That's what made Skenes and Judge so great. We're going to see Skenes and Judge again in the last series of the year. I don't know if they played before that, but the Pirates finished the season at the Yankees. So we'll see that probably again. No matchups are unique now. In that era, they were. Plus, you know what really killed that game? I forget what year it was. Remember when they did the tie?
Yeah.
Can't do a tie. Can't do a tie. I don't care what the managers want. I don't care if there's pitchers left. It's baseball. You can't do a tie. And what that told the fans was, this isn't a real game.
Yeah, you know what? If you have to keep using pitchers, then have position guys rotate around then. If it comes down to that, do it.
Bud Selig should have said, look, finish the game. And if you don't, there's going to be discipline.
Eric says, a couple of guests in Mark's show have said acquiring Vlad Guerrero will be a disaster. I know they would never trade for him, but why
Nobody said that on my show. That never came up on my show.
I mean, I've heard from either a personality standpoint or approach to the plate standpoint, it wouldn't be a good fit. I think approach to the plate, can you hit the ball hard and far, at least harder and further than what they've got.
Think about how stupid that sounds. You've not won a playoff series since 1979, but maybe we shouldn't get Vlad Guerrero. I always hear that. Whatever they do, they need to be careful. Really? Because it could go bad, right?
And as we just said, like, this is such a delicate little fragile egg, this time that they have as a contender. Like, don't waste the potential first year.
You got to take a chance. That's why, hey, Tim, I would trade Bubba Chandler. I wrote this in the Trib today. I would trade him and a few other prospects to get that Brent Rooker. Because Brent Rooker cost $750. You have 3 years of contract control with arbitration. He's an excellent hitter, and his window fits the Skenes window exactly.
Eric says, will the decent play of late prompt the front office to say we're in a good spot and they don't want to screw with it?
Yes.
Ergo, they'll stand pat the trade deadline.
Yeah.
That's sort of what we're getting at the start of the stream here. Jeremy brings up a point. He says, shocked the Pirates were able to take the series against Philly, who was hot. Well, yeah, I mean, Philly's great and the Pirates are middling, but, 2 things I'd say about that. First of all, what surprises me is that they did it without Keller, an injured Jones, or Skenes pitching. That's surprising. But it's also,
I mean, good for them. It's a microcosm, but it's great.
But it's also underscoring that if they do get in as the 6th seed, there's no reason why they can't make some noise, because with Keller and Skenes and maybe a healthy Jones by then pitching, They can beat anybody in a short series.
Yeah, but here's the problem. The bottom half of their lineup stinks. The whole bottom half. The bottom third for sure is useless. But the bottom half. And some days the bats just disappear, like yesterday. 6 singles. No runner got past second base.
Right. Yep, exactly. Jeremy added, excited for Skenes now, but one day he'll be a Dodger or a Yankee. I think everybody who's of import in baseball becomes a Dodger or Yankee, but there's a fatalistic angle to this Paul Skenes thing, which is why partly I think they're babying his arm as much as they are, because they don't want to lose a year of that to any sort of significant injury. Richard adds, the Pirates will do what the Pirates always do, which is very minimum to keep hope alive, but unfortunately likely not much more than that unless Skenes wills them to more. One thing that's brought up, Mark.
A pitcher can't will somebody. Okay, this guy pitches every 6 days. It's a 6-man rotation, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay, he can only do what he does on his day, and it's great and it's inspiring, but he can't will anybody anything.
The other thing about that comment is, when it comes to Skenes and the Pirates doing what they always do at the minimum, like I bring this up from time to time too. Like there's a difference between what they do in the offseason and during the season when they try to contend. Like they swung and missed, but at least they swung with the Archer deal. I always point out what they did in 2013, which is go out and get Morneau and Bird. But remember, Mark, they actually didn't even do that until the second deadline back then. Remember, there were 2 deadlines back then. They had
right.
They didn't do that until August. So, like, they really.
Well, there still are 2 deadlines. Those were waiver deals, as I recall, if that phrase still exists. Yeah. But
go ahead.
Well, I see. But I think they learned their lesson from that because they brought in those guys, Jay Haptu, and signed Russell Martin as a free agent. And they got how many home playoff games out of it? Just a handful, right?
5 total, right.
So I think Nutting looks at those acquisitions and bottom lines it and says, okay, we lost money on those acquisitions. So that's why I don't think they'll do it now.
Pete says ESPN has the Steelers last in the division. Mark says
that's right. I agree.
Steelers won't go very far as long as Tomlin remains the head coach. It does feel
that's right too.
For as much as everybody heaps praise on Tomlin, it just feels like there's a ceiling with him now, and we're at it.
This will be the year people figure it out because they're going to finish last in the division. I'm kind of leaning towards 8-9, and I bet Atlanta beats them in the opener because Kirk Cousins can score a lot of points, and the Steelers can't.
Brian says, Mark, you said they'd never get back to 500 once they fell 3 games under, but do you now at least see a chance that they'll serendipitously make the playoffs?
Yeah, they can make the playoffs, no question.
Yeah, I mean, like we said.
Do I think they will? No. I think it's probably a 60-40 chance against, and I think they just miss, which will keep that hook baited.
Finally, Mark, you excited for Friday?
Liverpool, yes, I am. I'm sad that the Liverpool Legends soiree on Thursday night got canceled, which I was supposed to speak at. And to be honest, not just because I wanted to speak at it, but because I wanted to meet some of the guys I've had on the show in person, like John Barnes, who is like an all-time football great, never mind just Liverpool. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm just excited for the whole month, really, because I'm going to Liverpool Friday against Betis, not Jerome Betis, but real Betis. At Acrisure. I'm going to Liverpool Man United at the Gamecocks thing, whatever that's called in South Carolina, a week from Saturday. Then I'm going to Liverpool's home opener at Anfield on the 24th. So that's going to be tremendous, all of it.
All right, so Mark will be on today, 3 until 6.
This game Friday is our first fixture of any kind with the new manager, which is kind of exciting too, Arnie Slot.
Let me ask you this: if it had been a real game, like if this had been a regular season game, does it sell out? Like are soccer fans not as interested just because it might not be all the real players?
It would never be a regular season game. We're not stupid like the NFL. We don't, English Premier League doesn't betray their fans by giving away games. I saw the dorky governor of New Jersey was saying, well, we need to get regular season Premier League games over here. No, you're not going to, because the Premier League doesn't have a playoff. It's 20 teams. You play every team home and away. Whoever finishes first is the champion. It's home and away, not home, away, and in New Jersey. Okay, so there is no league run better than the Premier League in terms of what it takes to win. That's all the European leagues. It's the fairest way of getting a result.
Mark's on 3 o'clock today. I'm back at it.
By the way, Tim, there's going to be 40,000 and more at Acrisure. I think that's a big success. I think it would have been better had there been more of a marquee opponent.
Oh, somebody else besides the Real Betis team that
if it would have been United or Arsenal, who were the other two Liverpool opponents on this tour, it would have sold out for sure.
I'll be back at it. Breakfast with Benz is back at it today and all of the week moving forward. And first couple of posts will be coming from training camp on Wednesday morning. This is Madden Benz Unfiltered. We'll be back with you next Monday, brought to you by Ultra Genius Brewing Company and the Barber School of Pittsburgh. And someday Mark will tell us about the Barbara Streisand on WCW story. We'll see.
That's right. Someday.
Someday we'll do that on Madden Benz Unfiltered.